When we're looking at big projects, we have a lot of tools, project controls, to help us predict and manage. However, what is it that they're helping us predict and manage? One of the issues is a lot of our tools don't really have a theory or a focus. I mean, we have accounting tools, we have activity-based costing, we have project management techniques like, from PMI or for Prince 2, but those techniques don't really base themselves on a theory of why and what we're doing. They attempt to control timing and attempt to control sort of nodes. But as far as I know, now here's where I'm going to step off my knowledge, my base of competence, is I know a lot about some things like activity-based costing and production. I know a lot about PMI, PMBOK and Prince 2. I know some about them, but I'm not really comprehensively aware. So I may make a mistake here, in which case you can tell me in the chat that I just made a mistake. That I know of, the project management techniques don't have deep theory in determining what's a good node versus a bad node. They pretty much assume that the people doing the work are going to figure this out. And to me, that's a big problem. I think, and I'll mention it later, value engineering would be the obvious tool to determine what a node is. So when we look at a lot of business techniques, they don't really have deep enough theory to guide us into true control. I think that value engineering is the thinking piece that can integrate with all these other business tools to control project outcomes by focusing on basically the why of what we're doing. So I'm going to describe how VE works with other big tools for big projects and why VE would add value to these other tools. And at the end, I'm going to discuss some of the things mentioned by Bent Flyvbjerg. I have no idea how you pronounce that in Danish. I just gave you sort of a Swedish pronunciation. I think the Danes do it a little bit differently. In fact, what you'll find out if you work in the Nordic countries is when the Swedes are together and no one else is there, they criticize the Danish accent all the time. And the Danes, when they're alone and there are no Swedes there, they criticize the Swedish accent all the time. So as we start, one of the goals of projects, this is like the first 30 minutes of taking a project management course is, you want projects to be on time, on budget with desired benefits. Now, most grown-ups don't really think about this anymore because they've never seen this happen. So, people try and do their best, but the amount of failures is so titanic that a lot of people have never seen a project that met even one of those three goals, because of slippage during the process. And so value engineering can help us sort of focus on this. We do have, there are enough examples of projects that are on time, on budget, and with desired benefits to know that it is possible, but it's still quite rare, quite exceptionally rare. And we'll talk with that Bent Flyvbjerg book in just a minute and how he addresses this. So I want to talk about some business tools here. Just, I'm not going to go over this in detail. It'll be on, if you want to look at some of the text here later. I'm making a slightly different point, which is these are sort of the normal business tools you might see. Plus there's another 10 floating around out there. I could have Prince 2, PMI on there. I could have a lot of stuff on here. TRIZ, whatever. If you look at this, they're all described in the way they're typically described when you talk about business things. But there's a detail that's not revealed, which is only one of these methods really has an underlying theory to drive it, and that is value engineering. Now, you may not think of it as theory, okay? If most people here are deeply embedded in value engineering, so you may not realize that some of what you do is very theoretically based. But the theory is important. And well, what is the theory? Well, there are basically two aspects to the theory. And, you may not have heard them called the theory before. But, when I was a kid, I was a nerd. And you know what? I'm still a nerd. So, this is how I think of things. And so if you look at lean production, no matter how long you study it, has no theory. And when I say lean production, also a warning, I'm talking right now about the American version, which is what most of you would know. The Japanese don't do lean production. They just work, okay? And then when we define things as lean production, this is what Western observers have sort of observed people doing in Japan, and they pull it back. but it's not actually what the Japanese are doing. So lean production, the way we think about it, people always say we're trying to drive out waste. There's no theory of what waste is in lean production. They just assume that you'll recognize it when you see it. And, maybe for the first 10 years, that's true. But when you get further down the path, it's going to be tricky to figure out what's waste and what's not. Now, just as a shortcut, what is waste? Anything that doesn't satisfy a basic function, basically, is waste. So in Japan, value engineering is the tool used to determine what waste is. What we have is we brought this back, the lean ideas back. We didn't bring back the deep theory. We just assumed that waste is obvious. Also, activity-based costing has no theory to define what an activity is. And the whole, I was there. You can see with my white hair, I was there when activity-based costing was invented. I know the guy that invented it. There's no theory discussion about how you define what really an activity is in a way that makes sense. We just assumed that we'll figure it out. Also, design thinking. Now, here I'm a little bit less competent with design thinking. It's basically based on empathy. There's nothing that I know of in design thinking that describes how you know what enough empathy is or what it is. So there's really, underneath these techniques, is a missing heavyweight thinking component, which I believe, and the Japanese believe, is supplied by VE. So for instance, the Japanese don't do lean, they just work. But they think what they do is daily application of value engineering. So what we think of as lean, they think of as the daily practice of the value concepts, especially basic function analysis. So here's the theory we have, and it's, this is a slide for a different purpose, but this illustrates the two main pieces of theory that we work with. One is this concept of the basic function here. That's the core and most important piece. But then with the FAST diagram, we've also put on the why and the how with a very precise way to ask the questions. So notice that we actually have, through the how and why questions, precise ways to define what nodes are, what a competent node is, which, as far as I know, now remember, this is where I may be screwing this up because I'm not really deeply knowledgeable about, PMBOK and stuff, is, as far as I know, the precise knowledge about node definition is not clear in the other project management techniques. We also have the when dimension. The key part is, though, the how and the why allow us to define modular bits that need to be done based on basic functions. You'll see a little bit later, this connects exactly to what Bent Flyvbjerg talks about as a giant problem in large product design. And it's a core thing that we offer to almost every other technique. So for what value engineering offers to lean is definition of what waste is. And waste can be really tricky to find. I'll give you an example. When I talk to hospitals, I sometimes talk to hospitals, and I never tell them this because they have to find it on their own, right? When people tell you stuff, just you resist it. Also, if I tell you stuff, you're going to, 20% of the people will resist it. But, if you have if you have scheduled surgery at a hospital that requires overnight stay, you should be able to get out of your car or be dropped off, walk straight into the hospital, show your ID, and walk straight to your room. Because that whole check-in process is totally waste. There is nothing in the check-in process that your physician could not have communicated to the hospital prior to you getting there. So the entire check-in department, the computers, the equipment, the documents, and your time and their time, if you use function analysis, you will define that entire process as waste. But a hospital has to be maybe 10 years down the path before they figure this out on their own, right? Because they've normalized that. They don't see check-in as waste, but in fact it is. And if you go to Northern Europe, like in Sweden, I was there last year, when you go to the mainline hotels, you just walk in, run your credit card through this, little machine. It spits out the ticket, and you go up to your room. You never talk to a person, and because they figured out that check-in process was waste. Now, I use that as an example to say waste is very subtle, and without value engineering, it's going to take you a long time to figure out what is waste because we normalize our everyday activities. So I would assert that value engineering has a huge benefit when connected to other things. But the problem we have in North America, and a lot of you will have, is your vision of, when I say the word value engineering, you think of the 5-day study, you think of it as a standalone technique. You don't have experience of the vision of seeing how, in little ways, the concept of function analysis can connect to daily things. We have on our website here at Value Analysis Canada a really wonderful presentation from a Japanese guy done, I think it was about 3 years ago. He actually, he's a, Japanese J-Save, whatever. He actually shows that they do 5-day work plans in Japan, but he also has 1-day work plans, half-day work plans, and 1-hour work plans, which he would use to improve office functioning, because offices are designed too. The way your desk is laid out is design. And if you use the concept of basic functions, it will help you. So that was one wonderful thing about that, the Quebec presentation we saw, is that they were using the underlying idea. They were using hardcore CVS type VM, where it was really useful at certain stages on big things. And then they were also using the thinking process in other aspects as it was useful there. So they were both using that super sophisticated save CVS kind of approach, and they were integrating the underlying thinking in their own unique ways. So they'd done some really cool innovation there. So Bent, our expert, some of you have read the book. I'm going to make some criticisms of the book. Why? Because I'm a professor, and I imagine that that's my job, to criticize other people. He has some really good stuff, but the book is also, when you read it, it's meant to be sort of a popular book. So he cuts some corners, and he's probably not telling you everything he knows. But I'm just picking out 4 of the elements that are most obvious, and 4 that I think that actually value engineering, especially, remember, he's talking about big projects. So right now I'm going to talk about the heavyweight CVS save version of value engineering. Okay, not smaller pieces you would lose in the wind. But these are 4 that I picked out of his book. He has several others. Let's take a look at the first one. One thing he says is think slow, act fast. And he talks about this for a while. And it's a good idea. Basically, slow down and make sure you know what you're doing. VE is a better answer to this than what he proposes, because he just basically says, talk a lot. I think that facilitator-led. Now, notice here that the CVS approach is facilitator-led. A lot of what they do in Japan is not facilitator-led. They have, all the employees basically know something about basic function analysis. So they're doing thousands of these a day in a lot of these countries, but not facilitator-led. One of the things that's the huge advantage of the facilitator-led VE, which, we are, have highest level of expertise in, is basically we slow down the process, but we slow it down in specific ways related to the project. So in the book, Bent is a little bit ambiguous about, slowing this down. He basically says, spend more time, think about what you're doing, ask the question why. We'll come up with that later. Facilitator-led sessions, especially the 5-day sessions, you can think of those as a slowdown, but it's a very specific slowdown based on understanding basic functions. So I believe that this is more sophisticated than what Bent is proposing in the book, but totally consistent. This is just like a more sophisticated. And, remember this book, How to Get Big, or I forget the title, but I have it right here, actually. This is basically a mass market book. So he's eliminated some of the technical details, but I totally agreed with every one of his points. I just thought we could do a little more sophisticated version since we're more or less insiders here. So the facilitator-led sessions, especially the 5-day sessions, are an exact answer to this think slow, act fast, because in that facilitator-led session, you also eliminate a lot of the problems. So that after this is over, your capacity to act fast is improved because a lot of the niggling details that could cause a problem have been eliminated. So that would be one way that VE, especially the facilitator-led 5-day session workshop, is a direct answer or direct support to this concept. The next one, we reverse. Basically, He says think right to left. Mainly, he has in his mind the metaphor of most planning diagrams, which in our culture, and I've never seen in other culture. I don't know if Arabs and the Israelis, they write the other direction. So I don't know if they do their diagrams the other direction. But what we do with our diagrams for PERT charts, Gantt charts, all that thing, is we always go from the left to the right, and the right is the answer, and that's what he's saying. And he says, no, start with the answer. Start with why you're doing this and what you want to accomplish. That's one of his insights. I agree with it. If you look at the FAST diagram, that's what the FAST diagram does, except we reverse it. We sort of have the left to right, we're reversed, but we're talking about the same concept. And the FAST diagram is actually more sophisticated because it's based on the functions, not the activities, and it is recursive, because when you're looking at a FAST diagram, you're always going left to right to left to right to left to right. There is sort of in a sense, no direction to a FAST diagram. So I think the FAST diagram is more supportive of this kind of integrative thinking. And what he's saying is his basic idea here, when he says think right to left, he says stay focused on your goal and make sure you have a good goal. So the first item, the think slow, act fast, he's saying make sure you have a good goal. The next one, he says stay focused on the goal. These are, I think, obvious that VE does a very sophisticated version of both. Next one he talks about is experience is the key. Here, I think in the book, he overweighs the experience of the project manager. I think what VE does, which supports him. So remember, I think he's doing a good job at his, the book is written, for a mass market. Think of the facilitated workshop. It's historically through all of VE, or at least for the last 20 years, the focus has been to bring a diverse group of people into the VE workshop. Why? Experience. Read this book and see how much weight he puts on experience. Well, I would assert, and I think, a lot of people would, group experience is actually more important than individual experience, because any individual experience is going to have flaws and weirdness to it. I have a class I've been teaching. I've been teaching cost accounting for 35 years. I still make mistakes in there. Students catch me on mistakes, like in the middle of class, and I go, oh, how did I do that? I've been doing that for 30 years. No one caught that before. So even if I've been doing it a long time, I'm still going to have, weirdnesses and flaws. But notice what the VE method or approach to setting up the workshop groups actually is experience focused. It's bringing in a very wide array of experiences. So I think this is also a direct and more sophisticated response to what is brought up in the book. And here's one that I'm going to also connect to Lean. One thing he says is you imagine your project is unique. And he makes a big assertion that there's almost no unique projects. There are aspects that are unique. Every project has some pieces that are unique. But he comes down to the idea of modularity. He says, really, he doesn't say this. I say this to my students. I said, there's no such thing as building a building. There's no human action called build a building, right? What can we do? We can drive a piece of equipment in. We can dig a hole. We can put forms in. We can pour concrete. We can put up walls. We can do all these physical things which can be described. But then at the end of doing all that, we say, oh, we built a building. But actually building a building, a dam, a bridge, whatever, is composed of many little things that are actual action items that humans do, or equipment does. And he notices that, and he basically says, knowing how your items are modular is the key. And he gives the example, Empire State Building, where they built, it was built in a really short amount of time. And one way they did that is all the floors are the same. And so as they went up and they built from the bottom up, they were able to gain experience because they were basically building the same floor over and over and over again. And he focuses on that. He says, even for big, giant nuclear reactor, whatever, all of these things are made of repeatable pieces, right? If you have to drive 500 concrete pillars into the ground to support weight, Well, what you're doing is the same thing 500 times. And that then is an essential link to his idea of modularity, which he never links to lean production, but I'm going to do it right now. And that is, people always say, well, is lean production good for big projects? And I always say, heck yes, because big projects are really made of a lot of little things that get repeated 1,000 times. And these would even go to emails, what documents are sent, what gets printed. If you're going to put windows up in a building, you don't put up one window. Most buildings are going to, the big ones are going to have 500 windows. Basically, you're doing the same thing 500 times. And that is where the application of VE to modular things is lean production, okay? And if you're talking about putting windows in, you're not going to have a 5-day workshop for windows, right? You have skilled tradespeople, they're coming in, you can sit down with them, you can have a half-day or a 1-day workshop, or half-day or even, a couple-hour workshop with them, applying VE. Now, notice this wouldn't be CVS type, big heavyweight VE, but applying the concepts. So he does notice that modularity is very important, because even in giant projects, most of the things you do are repeated. And so designing, he comes down very heavy on this, designing the module is very important. Then I make this link to lean and to VE, that the modules, I think, should be defined based on functions, VE analysis, for which heavyweight VE probably is good. But then the actual work in the modules probably is more like of a VE-driven lean production. And that is a weakness in our version of lean, is that without the concept of the basic function, lean teams have difficulty, continuing their process. So for instance, and then one paradox is some companies get to be so good they abandon the CVS and save approach. For instance, Toyota, as far as I know, Toyota doesn't really have trained CVSs or follow save methods, but it's because they believe they have developed their own way of thinking and operating that is based on function analysis. And I've been in their value engineering center. They have, like, right on Nagoya, the main campus, they have like a 6 or 7 story tall giant building that the whole building is a value engineering building. And they let me go on the bottom 3 floors. I wasn't allowed to go above, where they did teardown analysis, and Brett had the engineers in. Above that was when they were designing new cars, and that was secret, so I couldn't go in there. But Toyota believes that they are totally VE in every second of the day, yet they have innovated their own approaches to it and no longer follow SAVE or CVS. On the other hand, Mitsubishi has more than 300 CVSs work for Mitsubishi. They have chosen to go down the more, that other path. So there are multiple paths that you can go down with VE. I think we saw a really super example with the Infrastructure Quebec of them using the standard CVS kind of path where it's valuable, but also innovating with the ideas and creating their own value with thoughts underlying VE. And then I've tried to illustrate just now by just some examples of how VE can add the theory needed to lean. It can add the theory to activity-based costing. What's an activity? Well, a function, basic function would help you determine that. What is empathy? Well, doing a function analysis on design thinking in terms of what is empathy? How can you define that, or define what you need? To me, this seems like VE would add to everything. Not necessarily big heavyweight CVS 5-day VE, but the basic function concepts. So in my view, one thing that we miss in North America is that VE, value engineering, is also, remember I said also, a complementary tool. The way we normally think about it is it's a standalone tool, but it's also a complementary tool to design processes. It focuses on harnessing diverse input. And I believe it answers most, or almost all, actually I think it answers all of the issues raised in that book by Bent Flyvbjerg. That's the main point I wanted to make, is to show how VE is connected. Also, one thing that they say in Japan, especially Toyota, and one reason they focus on small scale VE, which we call lean, is they don't really care if every small lean project makes money, because to them, it's complementary to their training. And they believe that a manager that can't run a little tiny project to improve workflow in one office is never going to learn how to do a big project. So they also, in addition to the quote benefits from lean or whatever VE, they think of every single lean exercise using VE as the training ground that makes their middle managers competent enough to do much bigger projects. That's another problem we have. We tend to think of VE, especially the CVS kind of VE, as a standalone tool, and we never step back and think that actually the participation in these classes is a valuable, maybe essential learning opportunity to help people learn to do big projects. Bent also mentioned experience in big projects is important. Well, it's much cheaper to get a lot of experience in a small project. And also, if the small project fails, you don't worry about it. I happen to know a lot about Toyota, so I talk about them a lot. Toyota expects around a 10 to 15% failure. If the failure of projects drops below 10 or 15%, they start thinking, oh, everyone's getting too conservative. They're not taking enough risks. Now, Toyota is conservative. They don't want to take a lot of risks. But when failures start dropping so that there are not too many of them, they get nervous and think, oh, you know what? We're putting too much pressure on people. They're not taking adequate risks. We would like to see, if we're doing the right thing, we should be experience a 10 to 15% failure rate. To do that, you can't do that with expensive projects, right? That's another reason why, these little, improvement projects in lean are designed to be small, because you learn whether it's a small or big project, but the core is the lean aspect. So that's all I have to say. I'd like to take some questions. I'm sure I made some mistakes about PMI or Prince 2, because I do have a little bit of knowledge there, but I probably made some assertions that stepped a little bit out of scope there. When we post my slides, this little cameo video of me is not going to be in there, and you'll see some of the links. I mean, most everyone who's here knows what function analysis is, but I did put some links to some other videos and presentations that we have on the Value Analysis Canada website. We have a lot of material there. The Value Analysis Canada website is actually the most used website internationally for value engineering, value analysis, and by a lot. It's probably visited 4 to 5 times more than any other value analysis website. Anyway, that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Paul. Okay, so I have a few questions in the chat. Just a comment. The part about lean sounds akin to value stream mapping. Identify and remove, reduce waste in value streams, thereby increasing the efficiency. I'm just learning about it, and it sounds very efficient. Okay, so that's just a comment. I had a question.
Comment on that. Value stream mapping is purely an American technique. The Japanese don't do it at all. Yeah. But one of our weaknesses as North Americans is we want to have a financial return. We always talk about that, the financial return. They don't do that in Japan. They assume that competent managers improving things over and over again will ultimately lead to a financial return. But they don't measure every project that way. And that allows them a lot more flexibility. And so value stream mapping is an American style technique designed to allow managers to justify that there's a financial return. I'm not, so I think it has sort of mixed impact, but it is a cool idea.
Okay. So I have a question. It says, can you elaborate on how you define a CVS value engineering? What did you mean by that? And what do you think needs to be revised or changed, if anything?
I think the CVS, did they change the name of that? It's still called CVS certification, right? I don't have it, so I lose track. Okay. Basically, that certification is fairly difficult, and to keep your membership active, you have to lead quite a number of projects per year, and that's a struggle for some people. I actually don't think they should change that. I think it's great. It's like a very heavyweight, very serious thing for big projects. What I think is missing is what the Japanese have, which is a couple of lightweight certifications that take a lot less time and a lot less, they have 2 certifications at the level below CVS. And that allows organizations like Mitsubishi, because Mitsubishi tends to like certifications, even though Toyota doesn't, that allows them to send their people off. And the lowest level training is like 15 hours of online training. And then you get to be, I forget what it is, but it's basically you get to be a value associate or value supporter. And they want to have 2 or 3 of those people in every office. Like in every administrative office, they want to have 2 or 3 of those. That's what we're missing, which means that we don't have, because CBS is so good, actually, so strong, we don't have a vehicle to disperse it into small places, because what we have is big and expensive, and we should keep it, right? Because it's great. But I think, now this is my bias, I think what we're missing is the 2 lower level things that would be the support tool. In particular, the lowest level one that they have in Japan, which we can take here, because they have an English exam. The Japanese have a lot of business in Thailand, and the Thai people don't speak Japanese, but they speak English. So the Japanese, the Japanese SAVE, the Japanese organization, actually offers this certification in Thailand in English. I think if we did that, that would be amazing support for any lean innovation or lean operation, and it would also support bringing in the VM big work, right? Because if you come into a company where these concepts are understood, you could probably, the 5-day workshop, it's going to be more effective.
Right? So have an army of ants that have the basic knowledge about value and the function analysis and how they can apply it in very small projects all over their work.
And also, some of them will become so enthused that they will want to go and do, and they'll want to invest and become CVS. Right. Excellent. And so it's basically also a feeder into the more heavyweight. So I would say what we're lacking is an understanding and acceptance and belief that the lightweight version can add value also.
Excellent. Yes, I agree totally. So Paul, your presentations are always very fun to listen to because your point of view is different by being in the accounting world instead of the engineering world, let's say. So it's always a great a different point of view to see, and that's very great. So